Hey, it's really great to have you all of you here at GraceLife.tv in El Paso, Texas. As usual, I'm going to give you the top three places or whatever that are viewing us online or joining us online, members that are just being with us each Sunday. Actually, it's really interesting because at the very, very top of the list this week were France and Malaysia. Wow. I mean, they are at the very top. And China was down in that list a little bit. As far as the United States are concerned, Washington and Virginia both took top places for whatever reason. But anyway, that's great. We're just glad to have you all with us, all of you joining us online, wherever you are in the United States or around the world. It's just really good to have you with us. So let me just welcome you to week number 2 of our series called Deliverance. And in this series, we're talking about basically about salvation. About, you know, we all, I'm sure we all have questions concerning salvation about, you know, what it's all about, the ins and outs of salvation and all that kind of stuff. If you're raised in church at all, you probably have lots of extra questions about salvation, how to get saved, what salvation is about, all those different kind of things. Who can be saved? Who can't be saved? What's included in salvation? You know, what are the requirements for being saved? All those different kind of things, because our world has lots of requirements that seem to go along with that whole issue. So we're talking about some of those things in this series and trying to straighten that kind of stuff out so that we can understand it. Basically, there's actually only one requirement, but we're talking about all the other stuff that sometimes we have questions about. So today we're going to be talking about the faith question. The faith question, because our world kind of runs on that thing, and there are a lot of religions and belief systems and all that kind of stuff out there that focus a lot on faith and about how much faith you have or how little faith you have, all those different kind of things. And so the question we want to ask today is, how much faith is required for salvation, get saved, right? Or how much faith do you need in order to be on God's good side, right? How much faith do you need in order to stay on God's good side? Number one is, how much faith do you need to be saved to begin with? And then the second thing is, how much faith do you need in order to be pleasing to God? So in Matthew chapter 7, we kind of catch the tail end of this, of an account, of an incident. And I say tail, well, you realize what I mean by the tail end in a minute, because it's kind of interesting what happens here. And it's a time in which the disciples had attempted to cast this demon out of what the Bible says a lunatic. The disciples had attempted, they had done this many times before with other demons. They cast demons out of other people, but they were not able to cast this particular demon out. And so we find that out because it's a really interesting part of the encounter, because it's that part isn't actually recorded in the Bible. That particular piece of the incident. We kind of catch a tail end piece of it just in a moment. And a moment later, that's what happened. Is the disciples had tried to cast this demon out, were not able, and then Jesus comes along. Okay, so what happens is there's the father of this boy, and it's actually a boy. I don't know how old the boy is. It doesn't really say. I'm assuming it's a fairly young child, but I have no idea. And the father of this boy comes to Jesus and pleads with him to do something for his young son. So let's pick up the story in verse 14 of Matthew chapter 7. And it says, when they, that's Jesus and the disciples, came to the crowd. Now I want to stop right there. I know we haven't read very far, but we got to stop right there. Because what's interesting about this is that the immediate question I had was, why are Jesus and the disciples coming to the crowd instead of the crowds following Jesus? I mean, we find all over in the Bible where Jesus is constantly, inundated by people, and that's the reason why a lot of times he tells the disciples, stay here, I'm leaving. I got to get away for a while. But we did that yesterday. Me and Lee and Sean, we went up to the mountain and rode the quad and built a campfire and roasted some hot dogs and a hamburger, which we dropped in the dirt. And Sean and I ended up eating that one instead of Lee, but it's okay. We had a great time. It was really a time of just kind of rejuvenating yourself. You know what I mean? Just to get out of town. It was quiet and beautiful and up on the mountain and all that kind of stuff. And came home. I wasn't even tired. All that, 2-hour trip up there, riding the quad for several hours, the 2-hour trip back, and all the things that we did, and I felt rejuvenated. Felt really great. Well, Jesus needed those times as well, right? And that's most often what we read is that Jesus is trying to get away from the crowds because they've inundated him, they've swarmed him for days or weeks or whatever on end, and he just needed to get some time away. In this particular case, though, we read that when Jesus and the disciples came to the crowd, they're walking toward this crowd. So what's going on here? Well, let's read on. So when they came to the crowd, a man came up to Jesus, falling on his knees before him and saying, "Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is a lunatic and is very ill, for he often falls into the fire and often into the water." I assume that means that he's basically trying to kill himself. I don't know. I suppose that's probably what's happening here, is that the demon is trying to do away with this particular person. Well, okay. If you haven't had that question before, I'll answer it now. This is extra, won't cost you nothing. Why would the demon want to kill the person that he is indwelling? For one simple reason. The sooner Satan can get you off of this earth, the sooner he's got you forever, right? The longer you're left here on this earth, the longer the Lord has to work on your heart and your life, and you begin to realize, I need Jesus, right? So that's why Satan works through things like drugs and alcohol and anger and depression and all those kind of things. And he's hoping that will work on you, and he can get rid of you before you have a chance to meet Jesus. And he's won. He's won the battle with you, right? He's won the battle with you. Okay. So what's happening here is that the reason the crowds are gathered is because I'm assuming that this man's son is doing what he normally does. He's a lunatic. He's crazy. He's a maniac. He's indwelt by a demon that causes him to throw himself into the fire and then into the water and all different kind of things. I think the boys are actually trying to commit suicide in the best way he knows how. They didn't have guns back then. If they had it, that's already been over with a long time ago, right? In that particular sense. Not that I have anything against guns, because I sure don't. I've got a lot of them, and I love to hunt, and I love to shoot. I'll tell you what, that's the only way to go. That's part of my life, quite honestly. So what's happening here is this boy is acting like he normally does. He can't help it. He can't help it. It's not the problem. That's not the problem. I hear sometimes from school teachers and those things about children that are in school that I'm saying, when I hear what they do, special ed kids, when I hear what they do and how they act and all that kind of thing, I'm saying, they've got a demon, man. They're possessed by a demon of some kind. They're just not normal. Little kids, 5th grade kids, just being totally, completely crazy. Well, that's what happened. It drew a crowd. In that particular time, it drew a crowd because people were watching, going, wow, what do we do to help him? That kind of stuff draws crowds anyway. So what that tells me is Jesus is going to where the problem is instead of waiting for the problem to come to him. Most of the time it came to him because people were coming to him for wanting help. In this particular case, and if given the time, this man probably would have gone and found Jesus at some place, sometime. But since Jesus was headed that direction, he saw Jesus. He said, "Oh, hey, you're just the man I want to see. I've got my son here is a lunatic. He needs help. And you're the only one that can help him." Right? So, what happens then is that Jesus casts out the demon. Check it out. He says in verse 17. Do we have that? Okay. All right. "And Jesus answered and said, 'You unbelieving and perverted generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring him here to me.' And Jesus rebuked him," that's the demon, the evil spirit, "and the demon came out of him, and the boy was cured at once." Okay, So Jesus has just simply taken care of the problem. Disciples couldn't. Now, obviously, disciples had run into this particular problem before, and they'd always been able to do this before. The disciples had always been able to cast out demons. Now, that, again, I think is another assumption, a good assumption, because they told Jesus that they weren't able to cast out this particular demon. So they'd always been successful at casting out other demons, but this particular one was just wouldn't happen. It was too much for them to handle. So when they asked Jesus about why they had not been able to cast out the demon, Jesus goes on to say that it's because of the littleness of their faith. So he said, then Jesus came to the disciples privately and said, why could we not drive him out? What happened? What's the problem here? We've done this before. We've done this before. We've had success before. This particular one, so we've seen this boy before. But we weren't able to do that. Why couldn't we do it? And Jesus said to them, because of the littleness of your faith, for truly I say to you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. That's a pretty bold statement, isn't it? That's pretty crazy. Wow, I mean, wow. Now, did you see the faith question here? The faith question? And Jesus answers that question, and we're going to answer it here today, and I think the answer will probably surprise you. If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. The problem is the littleness of your faith. If you have faith this size, you will say to this mountain, and it will be moved. Nothing will be impossible. Okay, so the first misunderstanding is that people often have about faith is that faith is some kind of like a godly currency, money. Faith is like a currency that you can spend on God. If you got enough faith, hey, you can. There's your currency. It's $100 worth of faith, right? Instead of $2. And you can spend that on God, and God will give you $100 worth of your faith. That's what faith is looked at most often. That's one of the first misunderstandings. So it's like the more you have of it, the better off you'll be. The more you can get. If you have lots of faith, you'll get lots of stuff. If you don't have lots of faith, you won't get very much stuff. That's why there are a lot of religions and denominations and that kind of stuff that teach that very thing. If you just had enough faith, everything would be cool, right? That's why I'm rich and you're not. I got lots of faith. I noticed that in most of those places, the preacher is the only one that's really the rich one. But you know what? On our side of that picture, a lot of us blame ourselves for not having enough faith. We blame ourselves and say, we're the problem, I'm the problem, I just don't have enough faith, that's why my life is going to hell. I got problems with my family, you know. We got interpersonal relationship problems. I got financial problems. If I just had enough faith, it's my fault. If I just could get enough faith, everything would be cool. It's a problem. It's my problem. I just don't seem to have enough faith. And so we think that it's kind of, if we just had enough faith and we could, like a currency, that we could just spend on God, that's what it's all about. You got enough faith, you're good. If you don't, you're not, you're bad. So we like to blame ourselves for a lack of faith for almost anything and everything you can think of. So as a matter of fact, this whole idea is solid proof of the fact that we all like to think of faith as currency, isn't it? We all like to think of faith in that degree, that we can spend on God to get what we want from God. And if you ain't got it, you ain't going to get much. Let me give you an extreme example, personal example, I guess, of something I've experienced. Many years ago, I pastored a church up in a small community up in the mountains of southern New Mexico. And there was a lady there just after I had come to pastor this church, and her husband had died just recently, and she was telling me the story. She said her husband had gotten cancer, and so they'd been driving back and forth to Arizona to get the treatments and all that kind of stuff. And while they were doing that, while they were in this whole process, this terrible process of him wasting away and all that kind of stuff, some ladies from the community came up to her ranch house and said, "Listen, if you just have enough faith, your husband will be healed. You just need to have enough faith. That's the problem." Well, her husband died, and of course she's maybe to some degree blaming herself for not having enough faith, or maybe blaming her husband for not having enough faith because he got sick and died, and if he just had faith, God would have healed him, and all those kind of things. And these same ladies showed up her door after he was dead and said, the reason he died is because you didn't have enough faith. We're talking about condemnation, huh? Oh my God. I wouldn't have just showed him the door. I'd have give him one of those on the way out, I wouldn't have said, don't let the door hit you in the butt on the way out. Now, let me kick you in the butt on the way out. That's meanness. And they were members of a upstanding church in that community and spiritual leaders in that community. But that's what they honestly believe. That faith is a currency. If you got enough of it, God will give you what you want, right? So, once you jump to that conclusion, that idea, that your lack of faith is the root of your problems, then I know you're going to ask yourselves the next question. How am I supposed to have more faith? Right? If you've ever heard anybody say, or if you've ever thought in your own self, I don't have enough faith, and you wonder, how can I get more faith? I'm believing as hard as I can. So how can I have more faith? Well, our world's answer to that question is to say, just have faith. Well, that helps. I got it now. I think. No, of course we don't. Just have faith. Okay. How do I just have faith? I already had all the faith I could muster. How do I just have faith? On the surface, that sounds good, and a lot of people accept that statement, don't they? They say it, they pass it around. Well, just have faith, brother. Just have faith, sister. It'll be all right. Just have faith. Keep the faith. Hold on to faith. It's good. God bless you. Everything's fine. But you know what? If you're the person, that's okay if you're the one saying it. But if you're the one on the receiving end and you're the one that's in trouble, it don't look so good, does it? It looks great if your life's going well. It sounds good if everything's going good for you. And then you're going, I've got faith. I don't know what your problem is. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a terrible thing. So the fact is, how can you wholeheartedly have faith in something that you already doubt? This lady's husband was dying. There wasn't any doubt about that. The doctor said there's no hope. Could God have changed that? Yes, He could. Yes, He could. I'm not discounting the power of God in any way, shape, or form. But it's not about the faith that you have. Right? So, it's really not possible. You can't have faith in faith. But that's what our world tries to teach you. Just have faith. Well, faith in what? Well, have faith. So I'm supposed to have faith in faith? That doesn't work either. Now listen. Don't mistake positive thinking for faith. They are totally two opposite, different things. Faith is not wishful thinking. It's not. It's not positive thinking. You know, even if it's enhanced with the steroid of positive expectations. You know, we think, well, that's the way it is. If you got faith, you'll have positive expectations. You're thinking about a positive outcome. Everything will be cool. That's faith. I got lots of faith. Everything's going to work out. It'll be fine. It's okay. Okay, so I'm going to say something right here that We're going to use it in the right way. Number one thing I want you to know right away, right here, is it ain't about the size. Now that's a cute one. I like him. That poor little guy. Mama's able to reach it. Why can't I? Right? Size don't matter. It's not about the size. You say, now wait a minute. Well, hold the phone for a second here. Didn't Jesus just say if you have faith the size of a mustard seed that you'll be able to move mountains? Well, yes, he did. And didn't he say, now wait a minute, oh, you of little faith, why don't you have enough faith? If you had just faith the size of a mustard seed, everything would be cool? Absolutely he did. So let me ask you this question. Let's look at it from this direction. How big is a mustard seed? That's how big a mustard seed is. That's pretty small, ain't it? And we think, or we've been taught, and preachers preach all the time, if you just had that much faith, I'm ashamed of you got less faith than that. I can't believe it. I can't believe you don't even have that much faith. That's such a little bit. Anybody can do that. Right? All that stuff that we condemn ourselves for as far as faith is concerned. So, I need to tell you right here, we need to understand what's going on, because this is the only way you're going to come to a proper conclusion of what Jesus has in mind, what he is actually saying here. Right? Is that in that particular day and time, the mustard seed may still be, I don't know, the mustard seed was the smallest seed of anything that was grown for human consumption. Mustard, I love mustard in certain things. I like the mustard, seeds and those kind of things. Yeah, it's good. Most people like mustard on a hot dog. I prefer ketchup. How many ketchup eaters on hot dogs we have here? Okay, amen. Bless you, brother. Bless you, sister. Yeah. How many eat mustard on your hot dog? Oh, y'all going to hell for sure. I can't believe that. Oh man.
I love that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that too. Absolutely. I'm with you, man. Okay, so the fact is, here's what you need to know. Since it was the smallest seed, I don't know if it still is, but since it was the smallest seed that was planted in that day and time for human consumption, and he says, this is the smallest seed, that should tell us something. We're not thinking. We're jumping to our own conclusion. We're saying, oh, Jesus is saying, man, if I got less faith than the mustard seed. Wonder how small my faith is. If my faith is even smaller than the mustard seed, how small must it be? Well, there's your clue. There's your clue. That should tell us that Jesus' comparison is between the smallest thing he can think of. What's smaller than that? Nothing. Nothing. It's not the comparison between the smallest thing you can think of and something smaller, because you can't think of anything smaller. Maybe if Jesus had been living in this technological age, he'd have said, well, you know what a nanometer is? If you had faith the size of a nanometer, I don't know if that's the smallest, whatever a nanometer is, or a nanosecond. I don't know. That's the smallest thing I can think of, just words. There's nothing smaller than that. That's the point. That there is nothing smaller than that. So Jesus is talking about the difference between having faith or no faith at all. So it ain't about the size. Throw that out. We've all been taught that. We automatically think that in our human minds when we read that passage. We think, oh, Jesus is talking about, it's about the size. If you just had this much instead of this much, you'd be better. That's all you got this much. You got faith, but you only got this much. Now, if you had this much, you'd be cool. No, he's saying you've got this much or you've got this much, which is nothing at all. There's the comparison between having faith or having no faith. Right? So the next question is, if it's not about the size, then what is it about? Well, we've kind of talked about that a little bit. Since Jesus' illustration is about having some faith or no faith at all, then the only other option that Jesus is talking about here is, where is your faith placed? What is your faith in? Where have you placed your faith? Because you can't have faith in faith. It's always in someone or something. Faith has to have an object of someone or something. That's fact by default. You have no choice. You always have faith in someone or something. So what Jesus is telling the disciples here is that when the disciples came to Jesus and said, why couldn't we do this? Jesus said, you've cast out other demons. I'm going to jump to a conclusion here, and I'm going to say that in this particular case, the disciples walked up to this particular demon, and they said, oh my God. Whew. Either that, the other option, which I think is probably more true, is that they walked up there and they said, we've done this before. Right? Where's their faith? They said, Jesus, why couldn't we cast this demon out? He said, how many times do I tell you, dudes? It's okay, but you know what? You start to have faith in yourself again. You can't do that. That's not where faith is. That kind of faith don't accomplish nothing other than make you successful in this world, maybe. Who our faith is in, that's what makes the difference. And so Jesus says, if you had just even the faith of a mustard seed in the right person, still not about the size, remember? It's having faith in Jesus or no faith in Jesus. So when the disciples couldn't cast out this particular demon, they put their faith, they had faith. Oh, they had faith, but it was, we can do this. We got it. It's all right. God, Jesus, you stand over there, we'll take care of it, right? We got it. Well, they couldn't. Now, what's the problem here? Jesus says, because of the littleness of your faith. You don't have any faith. Well, not in the not in the right place. You see, faith is simply the recognition of the one who determines and directs every outcome of every situation in our life. It's having faith in Him, not in the situation, not in other people, not in anything else except Him. Even if it's faith that is as small as a mustard seed, if that faith is placed in Jesus Christ, completely and only in the one Lord of this universe, who controls this universe, who holds this universe together, He said, you got it. Your faith is in the right place. So listen, what you need to know here is that our faith finds its very existence in that person. Mustard seed. In another place, Jesus said, if you plant this seed, as small as it is, it will grow into one of the largest plants in that particular set of plants, right? Almost like a tree, he said. Well, why did the seed grow? Because of the life in the seed. Not because of its size. Jesus says size don't matter. It's because of the life in the seed, not because of the seed itself. We're still focusing on size. It's the life in the seed. Now, you can have a big seed. I don't know how big seeds get. I don't know. You know, you see some pretty big seeds like nuts and stuff that we eat. But you know what? If it's been boiled or overheated or whatever, or bugs have got to it, you can plant it and you can water it and you can tend it every day of your life, and it's not going to grow. Why not? Because it's dead. You can have all the faith you want to. It ain't going to grow. It's the life in the seed, not the seed itself. That's what makes the difference. Matter of fact, Ephesians 2:8. So how much faith does it take to be saved? Well, Ephesians 2:8 says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and even that faith isn't from yourself. It's a gift of God." Now that should tell you something. That should tell you something. That the faith that we have is a person. It's not something you muster up. It's not a currency that you spend. It's not the size of it. Its faith is a person. And even the faith that we do have, He gives to us. Okay, you want to put it the other way. We place our faith in Him because He is our faith. He is the one that lives in us. It's about the life that's in the seed. It's about the life that lives within us, not about who we are or how much we have or how much faith we have. Faith is a person. Therefore, we depend on His faith, because only His faith is perfect and never fails. So how much faith does it take to be saved? The same amount that it takes to move a mountain. The same amount that it takes to move a mountain. Is it about size? Well, I hope not. But if that's the case, then nobody would ever be saved. And how much faith does it take? Does Jesus say it takes to move a mountain? It's a life in the seed. Faith the size of a mustard seed. Because even the smallest possible amount of faith in the right person is enough to move a mountain. You ever thought about moving a mountain? I think Jesus was talking about the fact that he told disciples, "You'll do even greater works than these." When they said, to watch Jesus do these miracles and healings and all that kind of stuff, and he said, "You'll even do greater stuff than that." Well, how can there be anything greater than that? Well, I'll tell you what, there is something that is way, 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 way greater than that. And that is when you speak a word of the word of Jesus to someone else, and they say, "You know what? I need what you have." You have just transferred, you have been an instrument in transferring that person from an eternity in hell to an eternity in heaven. Can you do that? No. That's even greater than moving a mountain. Who cares? They got huge machinery that move mountains these days. You know what? You can transfer someone from an eternity in hell into eternity in heaven. That's greater than any mountain you'll ever move. That's something God does. That's the point. Something God does, not that we do. Which is exactly why we simply trust Him, faith Him for everything. Simply knowing that no matter what the circumstance or the problem, He's the one that takes care of it, not us. He says, quit worrying about it. Trust me. Just trust me. Just rest. It's okay. I know life's hell sometimes, but you know what? That's what Ecclesiastes says. Life's a bitch and then you die. Man. Because we live in this world where we live in a fleshly body that is sinful. And as long as we live in this fleshly body where we sin in our flesh all the time, we're going to have problems. The key issue is to place our faith in the person who is our faith, Jesus Christ. Cool. God's awesome. Lord bless you all.